How you doing? Welcome back to the EducatedCollins Snap channel. Today we're going to be talking about Black Knight. This is the newest card, just came out. We're going to be talking about the ins and outs, whether I like it, whether I don't, and regardless, we have build guides for you. This should be an interesting one. Let's begin. So Black Knight we have is a 1 energy 2 power card. After you discard a card, you add an ebony blade to your hand with the card's power. Now you can do this once per game. This is pretty interesting in that it has synergies with lots of discard. It's essentially just a discard addition. Now the weird thing is you kind of have to build around it. So it's not necessarily like a card you just add in and then boom, it works, right? You have to kind of keep this in mind if you're playing with it, since if you're running any of the smaller discards, then you basically have a pretty weak Black Knight effect. You could justify that you're not using this for the blade, you're just using it for like an extra discard block with Modus, which is fair, but that's not what people are really doing when they're playing this card. They're trying to make these big numbers. Infinite is a really powerful and common target, and then you have just regular Giganta, regular Red Skull, these 14 power cards. So that's the idea here. There's a really nice synergy with Lady Civ and Ghost Rider. You can play Black Knight on 1, Lady Civ on 3, Ghost Rider on 4, and you just get a really powerful turn. So there's definitely some potential here in the card. However, I would say that there are some weaknesses baked in. First of all, it's a combo card, and I've been saying for a while now that I just don't like combo cards in general. Just for like your main deck, a consistency thing, unless it has multiple win conditions. So things like Hela, you can make Hela have multiple win conditions, and then even though it's technically a combo card, there's a lot of activators that it's not too bad, right? But with this card, same thing, it's a combo card, and it just, you need a lot of the pieces in the right order for it to work. So anytime there's a card like that comes out, I'm just initially down on it, and then it has to stand the test of time. It has to prove itself essentially to me. So yeah, not a big fan of the combo nature. And essentially it's a discard piece, but discard already doesn't really need a piece like this. So you're not necessarily adding it to already powerful deck. That's the second criteria I have. If you want to analyze a card, whether it's going to be good, can you just blindly add this to an already powerful meta deck and then it just makes it better? And I wouldn't say this does that. Like, first of all, this card isn't that meta, in my opinion. Like right now, people are playing it because of the new card, but it's not that meta. And when you put this in a discard deck, you have to change the discard deck. You can't like slot the weakest discard card with this and then bam, it's better. That's not really what's happening here. You slot this in, then you want to add all the synergies to make it work. So you're making a new deck entirely, and I think that takes time before you find the right combinations. Things like Silky Smooth wasn't created in a day. It took time, and essentially in that time you can, you can get it later if that's really that important. So I wouldn't like jump the gun on this. So overall, when it comes to would I buy this, do I recommend it, I would say it's a pretty big no for me. And I would say like I have been on a streak of no's, but it just shows like some of the powerful cards and not powerful cards, right? If you're trying to use your resources efficiently, you have to be careful and you don't want to just waste it. But yeah, like there's a lot of issues. It's a convoluted combo card. Another thing is winning is telegraphed. So that is true, right? If you play Black Knight and then you discard Infinite, right? Like, okay, like I'm probably not like, and this it's time to leave, right? Like it's not necessarily that simple. If you don't have a counter, if you don't have a Shang-Chi, Ghost Rider, anything like that, then yeah, maybe it's time to leave. So there's definitely some issues in that if you're going to win with this combo, people can leave, right? And it's not guaranteed you're going to be getting a lot of cubes off of this, which I just think is not great. You want a build that can swing the game last turn. Those are really the best climbing decks because that your opponent thinks they're going to win, but you turn it around. That's why Shang-Chi is really powerful, really common, because it turns the game around last turn. Those type of things are really what you want to do. But the way Ebony Maw works in that you want to get it off early so you can take advantage of the other side of it, like the discard side with like a Hela or Apocalypse or whatever, means that you're opening up some turns for your opponent to counter the card, and that's really a little bit disappointing in the meta. Like that's not the card's fault. That's just like how people play. So that's a little bit unfortunate. It's easier countable. Shang-Chi super common, right? You're summoning big stats, which just makes Shang-Chi a perfect target. Shadow King is also pretty bad here because yours Blade also gets nerfed down to its base power. So if you play those cards early, you know, it's pretty easy. And a lot of times you're ghost riding as well. So you're ghost riding on Infinite or something like that. Same thing. Shang-Chi's easily in there. And then another thing is that you really want to play Zabu with this since the Ebony Blade is a 4-cost card, and then you have Ghost Rider as a 4-cost card. If you're playing Dracula, it's a 4-cost card. So you can have really useful 4-cost cards in here. And then if you're playing Mobius, that just shuts that down. And Mobius is still common enough that it's relevant. So, you know, just a lot of downsides. And then the last thing is like, you don't need this to play discard. If you want to play discard, I can build you a perfectly viable deck without a Black Knight at all. So you have to build a new deck to play this card. It's not a card you add in. So if you want to just play discard, there are decks you can just build. Like you don't need to use 6,000 tokens to build discard. So this was not the case with MODOK, where you need MODOK to play discard well, like to have the options to play multiple viable discard decks. Like if you don't have MODOK, then you have to strategize a little bit and make it work for you. Whereas if you have Black Knight, like who cares? Like it's not the end of the world. You're not messing up your builds or anything like that. So in my opinion, I think this is one of the worst cards we've had recently. Now, this card is not bad. Let me be clear. I know when you do best, worst stuff, like obviously the worst card has to be bad. No, I just think that they've added a lot of powerful cards. And recently, right, we've seen the meta just being changed with the powerful cards, Mobius into Elias, into Loki, into Elsa, like, you know, so it's, so when it comes to this, I just don't think this is going to impact the meta in a big way. It has that one niche archetype, and if you like that, then cool. But even if you like that archetype, you don't need the card. So it's just not necessarily a bad card, but it's an unnecessary card in the metagame in how it plays. So that's my issue with Black Knight. Definitely a big spiel, but I think it's justified in that I want to make sure that you're aware of the downsides if you're going to pick it up. You can definitely pick it up if you still like it, blah, blah, blah. That's not an issue. I just want to get across some of the downsides with this card and so you can make an informed decision. And then following up, time for synergies. I know I just started bashing cards, but we're still going to talk about build decks, whatever. But yeah, so some of the synergies we're going to be looking at. Zabu, of course, because a lot of the cards you want to be playing are 4-cost. The blade itself is 4-cost. Shuri, you know, a lot of the other synergies are also 4-cost, so that's something you would definitely do. Lady Civ, Ghost Rider is already a good combo, like even without this, but it just adds another kind of tempo. If you're hitting things like Infinite, if you're hitting things like Red Skull, right, you can just swing the board really hard on turn 4, so that's just a nice combo to do. So you can go like Lady Civ, play the Black Knight, play the Ebony Blade, and then Ghost Rider final turn, summon the Infinite back or something like that. That's like best rolls, but yeah, it's definitely something you can do. Then Apocalypse has the same effect in terms of similar to Dracula, where you will get the post buffed power. So let's say you have not discarded anything at all, you're getting a 12 power Apocalypse. And that's still something you can synergize with MODOK if you're playing that type of deck build. So that's something pretty good, right? 12 power for 4, not bad at all. So that's something very synergistic if you just want to play a regular discard deck, but just have a Black Knight in there for whatever reason. And then Shuri is nice with Black Knight because you're getting very big stats on 4, right? So what you can do is discard, Red Skull, discard Infinite, and then Shuri, Infinite, Shuri, Red Skull, and then Taskmaster that follow up, right? So you essentially get another way of playing Shuri. Not that Shuri needs more ways to play Shuri, but this is definitely something you can do. So if you're playing like a 40 power Infinite on one lane and you're Taskmastering on the Eve one, right? So there's definitely some synergies with Shuri if you want to do that. Hela, of course, if you have tons of big power cards for the Black Knight, well, then Hela just makes a lot of sense if you want to play that particular play style. And Dracula is just another tool for discarding. Essentially, Black Knight is like another Dracula, actually, just the way it functions. So, you can run 2 Draculas. Why not, right? And Dracula is such a good card in what it does. And then Black Cat is just auto trigger for the Black Knight. Black Cat, Black Knight, they work together. You can get a 4/9 Ebony Blade. It's nothing to write home about, but it's auto. It's done for you, right? You don't have to do too much work. You don't have to play other discards. So that's definitely something you can do. So yeah. Now, moving on to essentially the Spotlight tier list and all that we do have. Actually did not set this up immediately, but there we go. Somewhat. So we do have the card, and then we do have the tier list. So here I did have it as B tier. Honestly, I wouldn't hate moving it down. B tier is fine. Like if you're missing all 3 cards and you want to get you want to shoot for it, that's fine. But I just don't think it's like super relevant. But I think it's like overall the tier list is still fairly fine. I haven't really made any changes to the tiers ever since I do it in the beginning of the month. So yeah, generally I wouldn't jump the gun on this particular Spotlight. The other 2 it's next to are Series 4 cards, which is a big negative for me since you want at least 2 Series 5 cards to be activated, right? The new card and something else, so that you're getting at least 15,000 tokens worth of value. That's just a baseline, but you're not getting that, so that's a little bit sad. And then the card itself, Black Knight, I just think isn't super necessary. So you have to really like this card, or you have to really want the other kind of cards next to it, right? You have to really want Stature and MODOK. So if that is the case, then yeah. But overall, right, I'm not the biggest fan of this particular Spotlight, so that hasn't really changed. Now, let's go to some build ideas. Now, I know, I hear you. But I do think you can actually build some decks with it. Ooh, this needs to be raised up a little bit higher. Thank you, that's a lot better. But the first one is, in my opinion, the one I'm most interested in, the one I would try if I had the card. I didn't get the card yet, but this is the build I would try. I just think there's a decent amount of things going for it. So you have the Black Knight, of course. You have the Blade, of course, to kind of have an easy discard if you want to do it that way. You have the Lady Sif Ghost Rider, of course. I feel like if you're not playing Lady Sif Ghost Rider, like, like why play this deck, right? Like why how is this better than any other discard, right? So I like the Lady Sif Ghost Rider, but then here you have a couple of little adjustments to kind of try to mitigate the downside. First of all, we have Daredevil Professor X. So that can give you a way to win that turn 5 lane, right? I mean, that turn 5 to win a lane, right? I think that's pretty powerful. And then we have magic. So magic, what allows you to do, it makes the game longer, also allows you to protect your blade. So what you could do is you magic at some point, and then you can play the blade and play a Cosmo behind it, right? Like, so usually what people are going to do is you're going to wait until final turns to Shang-Chi you, to Alioth you, whatever. You can Cosmo, try to defend your blade, try to defend your final turn. So I like that little setup that you can do. And then you have turn 7, right? You have a couple of options. You can play Lady Sif plus Ghost Rider turn 7, which I think is really nice to have like this little big power play. And then you have 2 targets, Giganto and Infinite. Both work pretty well here. And Giganto is something you can play just basically like baseline if need be. Infinite's definitely a lot harder. But I like this. I like what it's going for. I think it makes sense in the context of the meta. So this is what I would be trying if I had the card, but I don't, right? Because I just don't think it's worth it. But yeah, this looks good to me. Next up, we have the build I would say most people are running. This one is just like a little bit more, what's the word? A little bit boring. Sorry. That's maybe mean. But you know, a little bit more standard. This is definitely more focused on the Zabu Dracula kind of synergy, where you are playing Zabu and then you're trying to get a ton of like 3 cost power cards, and then it lets you play double 4 on 6, which is pretty good, you know, with the blade. So this I think is nice. The one issue, of course, is Mobius, and you can see our last deck has Mobius, right, to kind of deal with the Zabu players, because you're going to be seeing a lot of that right now. So, you know, I feel like you want to be running some, like, I always try to think, what does my opponent want to do, what want to play, and how do I deal with that, right? Like that's a way of like winning automatically. Just build where your opponent like hates you because you're already running the Mobius, right? Even though you're playing with the new card, you at least have the tech into what people are wanting to do. So but yeah, generally this is pretty fine if the opponent's not running Mobius or anything like that, or they don't draw it, of course, right? Like they're not always going to draw it on 2. So you do get a lot of little synergies here. The Dracula is pretty good. The discards are pretty good. You can Ghost Rider a lot of good targets. Magneto is also a pretty powerful card just generically. A lot of people are playing Dracula, so Magneto just like boos everything. You know, you can definitely win lanes pretty easily that way. So definitely just a nice, simple Black Knight deck that has good synergies and works well. So definitely something you can try. Next up, we have the like Apocalypse variant of the same deck. So here, instead of focusing on just summoning tons of small cards with the Zub, or with the summoning some tons of 4-drops with the Zabu, instead of we're getting rid of the Zabu, we're going full Apocalypse synergy. We're running MODOK back in there, and you have Black Cat as an easy activator, but you also have still the regular activator of Lady Civ into Apocalypse or Infinite, and then you have the Dracula, Ghost Rider, the same combos, right? So everything works here. This plays more like a normal discard deck than anything else, and you just hope you hit something good with the Ebony Maw. Like that's the baseline here, but this is definitely the most normal discard deck with a Black Knight in there that I think people play and have success with. Next up, we have Shuri, right? So this is what I was talking about, where Shuri is another good synergy here, because if you discard the Infinite, then you can go Shuri into Infinite into Taskmaster, which just wins you the lane. Like that's hard. That's not really feasible to deal with unless you're playing like your summon super combo deck here. So there's definitely a lot of power in this. It's also nice if you discard Red Skull, then you don't have to have that Red Skull disadvantage, because usually what happens is, sometimes Red Skull can make your opponent win that Red Skull lane because you're giving them 8 power, sometimes 6, 8 power. That's a lot. So especially if you don't have Sauron or anything like that. So with the discards, you get rid of that. You don't have to deal with that. So essentially you're playing regular Shuri, which we've seen is very strong, except now you have a way of kind of Sauroning the Red Skull or getting a gigantic Infinite without really struggling too hard. I think that's definitely viable. So, if you like Shuri, this is definitely another way of playing Shuri. Just gives you another option. Seems like it works pretty well. You also still have the Lady Sif Ghost Rider, which I just think is good. So, thumbs up for me. I think this is pretty cool list. And then next up, we have Lockjaw. I think this is the last list we have. So this is I think makes sense in that you're already playing big cards, right? And Lockjaw loves when you play big cards, right? Hey, you're playing big cards? Let's go Lockjaw. So you play the Lockjaw and you try to shoot for your big targets. Another thing is you do have to be careful. I haven't talked about something about Black Knight, but if Black Knight gets Killmongered, you don't get the discard, right? So that's a easy counter if you want to counter a Black Knight. Same thing with the Lockjaw, right? So if you're trying to discard like Lady Sif or something, and you put the Black Knight in the Lockjaw, you're not gonna get the Ebony Blade. So if you get Black Knight turn 1 and you're going to be discarding, then just play it on the field. Now, if you don't get the Lady Sif off, right, if you don't find it, then you can go Lockjaw into Black Knight, and that's perfectly viable, right? So you do have that option, but you do have to be aware of the ordering and the priority where, hey, if you want it to work, you need to have Black Knight on the field. So definitely an interesting idea for sure. This one I think can work pretty well. You're not really focused on any Zabu targets or anything like that, so I think it's generally fine. But that is the card. I mean, I was saying it's one of the worst cards recently, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Don't take that out of context. I still think that's the wrong button. Sorry. I still think you can definitely play with this card and find success. I don't think it's a bad card to have fun with. I just think in the context of will this be a meta card a month from now or 2 months from now? Unless something changes, unless things get buffed, I don't really see it. So that's why I would just say, be careful if you want to spend your spotlights. Be careful if you want to spend your tokens, that kind of thing. It's not necessary, so I would just save in particular, but still has some fun uses, and it's a fun card. That is true. The card looks super fun. So, and at the end of the day, sometimes that's the most important thing. But that's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Now we press the button.
EducatedCollins snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be